Imagine. The sky turned dark, rain poured incessantly for 40 days and nights, and the only hope for life lay on a ship longer than 130 meters. Inside, lions lay beside sheephawks flew with doves. How did Noah manage to operate a giant zoo amidst the vast ocean? Let us go back in time to find the answer. When speaking of Noah's Ark, most people often remember a familiar detail for every animal species: one male and one female pair. But if reading the Bible carefully, we see the passenger list on this ship was much more complex and intentional. First is the group of animals called clean. These were species brought onto the ship not in a single pair, but 7 pairs for each species. In this group were cattle, sheep, goats, and some bird species like doves. The number 7 not only bears symbolic meaning of completeness in biblical thinking, but also reflects a very practical survival calculation. After the Great Flood, humans needed animals for food and to offer as worship sacrifices. If only a single pair were brought, sacrifice would quickly push that species to the brink of extinction. Bringing more pairs helped ensure that even if some individuals died from disease accidents or were used for rituals, that species would still have sufficient numbers to continue reproducing and existing long-term. Conversely, species considered unclean, mainly carnivores, were only brought onto the ship in exactly 1 pair. Lions, tigers, bears, or wolves all belong to this group. The reason lies not only in ritual factors, but also stems from safety and living space on the ship. Predators are both dangerous, require large areas, and consume a large amount of food. Bringing too many carnivores would unbalance the entire tiny ecosystem on the ship. A single pair is enough to preserve the lineage without causing unnecessary risks. Finally, to understand why a ship about 135 meters long could contain all species, one needs to grasp the concept of created kinds, also known as baraminology. The Bible does not say Noah brought every breed of animal in the way modern humans classify today. He did not bring hundreds of different dog breeds, but only a pair of original dogs. From this original pair over thousands of years after the Great Flood, new dog breeds gradually differentiated and diversified. It is this concept of created kinds that is the key, helping the story of Noah's Ark become more logical in terms of logic, and is also the biggest point of controversy between modern science and the traditional understanding of the Bible. When mentioning Noah's Ark, the toughest question always appears immediately. So where were giant creatures like elephants, or even dinosaurs on that ship? A mature male elephant can weigh up to 6 tons, while species like Diplodocus in popular imagination were tens of meters long. If all were mature individuals, the area problem would be almost impossible to solve. But a hypothesis put forward by many follows a different direction called juvenile selection. Instead of bringing the largest individuals onto the ship, Noah may have chosen animals that had just passed the juvenile stage, old enough to reproduce, but not yet reaching maximum size. These individuals were much more compact, ate less, were easier to control, and especially had good resistance. Most importantly, when leaving the ship after the Great Flood, this was the most vigorous stage for reproduction, helping the population quickly recover in a new world. Another question, no less difficult: where were millions of insect species? If imagining every insect species needed its own cage, the ship certainly could not contain them. But in reality, insects do not need large spaces. They can reside in the wooden crevices of the ship, in sacks containing seeds, or even cling to the fur and skin of large animals. With tiny sizes and high adaptability, insects created almost no significant burden regarding area or food, yet played an important role in reconstructing the ecosystem later. Finally is the way space was distributed on the ship. A reasonable hypothesis suggests that the lowest level was reserved for large animals. Placing heavy mass at the bottom helped keep the ship's center of gravity low, increasing stability when facing violent wind and waves. The middle level was for medium-sized animals, along with most of the food reserves. And the top level, the airiest place, was used for birds and humans. This arrangement is not only reasonable biologically, but also fits the basic principles of shipbuilding engineering, turning Noah's Ark from a legendary story into a carefully calculated survival problem. When the door of Noah's ship closed and the outside world sank in floodwaters, the real challenge began. The problem was no longer bringing creatures onto the ship, but how he and thousands of animal individuals could survive for over a year in a closed, dark space constantly shaken by sea waves. What to eat, how to sleep, and how to maintain life, that was an unprecedented survival problem. One of the most interesting hypotheses put forward is the phenomenon of forced hibernation. In the environment on the ship, limited light, high humidity, cramped space, and the rhythmic shaking of sea waves could have caused many animal species to fall into a state of deep reduced metabolism. They did not hibernate completely like bears in winter, but were less active, ate less, and existed almost at a minimum level. This had vital significance because if every species ate and moved as normal, the workload of care would far exceed the ability of the 8 humans on the ship. This state of slow sleep may have helped Noah save a large portion of feeding effort, turning an impossible mission into something maintainable. Food was also not a chaotic mess. The Bible says Noah brought every kind of edible food, and this allows us to visualize an organized storage system. Dry grains were used for birds and small species, easy to preserve and less prone to spoilage. Dry hay was dried and compressed tightly for ungulates, like cattle, sheep, goats, being both compact and energy-rich. Even carnivores did not necessarily have to be fed fresh meat. Some hypotheses suggest they could be maintained by dry protein sources, dry insects, or limited rations throughout the time on the ship, especially when they were also in a low-activity state. Drinking water was truly the lifeline of the ship. A reasonable hypothesis suggests that the ship's roof was designed to catch rainwater, leading it through wooden channels into internal tanks. In a flooded world, pure rainwater was the most stable and safe supply source. This system was like blood vessels, silently nourishing thousands of creatures day by day. Not mentioned much, but indispensable. And then there was light. Lighting a fire in a wooden ship full of dry hay grains and animals was extremely dangerous. According to Jewish legend, Noah used gemstones capable of glowing to illuminate the inside of the ship. Although legendary in nature, this detail reflects a very real worry: how to have light without turning the ship into a fireball drifting in the ocean. In that dim darkness, Noah's ship was not just a shelter, but a closed ecosystem where every small detail decided the survival of all humanity. Not every creature stepped onto Noah's ship. Outside the ship's hull, another world still existed and struggled to survive amidst the Great Flood. First is the underwater world. Fish and marine creatures did not need to board the ship because their habitat was water. However, that does not mean they were absolutely safe. The Great Flood was not just rising seawater, but also a violent mixture of salt water from the ocean and fresh water from rain. The sudden change in salinity, temperature, and currents created an unprecedentedly harsh environment. Only fish species with high adaptability able to withstand large fluctuations could survive this chaotic period. At the boundary of the two worlds were amphibians. They did not completely belong to the water nor completely to the land. During the flood, some could cling to the ship's hull, drifting with the water, hoping to survive thanks to persistence and endurance. Others were forced to swim on their own in the swirling currents, facing exhaustion collisions and continuous environmental changes. For amphibians, the Great Flood was a true struggle for survival, where the line between life and death was more fragile than ever. Finally is the most symbolic image: the raven and the dove. When the water began to recede, Noah released the raven first. The raven is strong, eats carrion, and can survive on what remains floating on the water's surface. It flew away and did not return because the outside world was enough for it to exist. The dove was different. Gentler and pickier, it needed a sign of new life. Only when finding a green leaf, the symbol of dry land and rebirth, did the dove bring hope back. Two bird species, two personalities, and two different messages about survival after the apocalypse. When the door of Noah's ship reached Mount Ararat, it was not just the moment of ending a great flood, but the beginning of the greatest resettlement in the history of life. Each species stepped down from the ship not in chaos, but following a new natural order. Large animals, small animals, birds, insects, all participated in the process of re-establishing the ecological balance of a newly renewed world. The ship then was no longer a shelter, but became a fragile bridge between destruction and rebirth. In the entire story, Noah appears not only as a skillful shipbuilder. He is the person entrusted with a much heavier role, the guardian of nature. His responsibility did not stop at saving his family, but was to preserve the diversity of life for generations that had never existed. Each pair of animals on the ship was a commitment that the world after the disaster would not start from zero, but from hope. And then that ancient story belongs not only to the past. Today, humanity is also facing floods created by itself. Climate change, environmental destruction, hunting, and mass extinction of animal species. We no longer have a second Noah's ship, but we have a responsibility, like he once shouldered. Protecting nature is not a choice, but an obligation to the future. Because after every disaster, the most important thing is not survival, but whether we still keep hope to hand over to the world of tomorrow.